G'day guys, welcome to another layout. Now, this particular layout has been requested. It is showing you how I build a cluster, basically. So I've chosen to do this particular layout and to show you how I create a cluster on a layout. And then I'm going to do a tips and techniques video showing just a generic, just creating just a cluster. So using different things. So this time I'm using florals, I'm using flowers. These are die cuts that I got from die cuts. Yes, they're die cuts because I've cut them, but it's a die that I got from AliExpress. I got this one from. So they're just generic flowers. I like to use it's kind of like the cocoa vanilla thing. When you purchase from Cocoa Vanilla, their flowers are flowers, but they're not necessarily a specific flower, like a rose or whatever. Uniquely Creative, very often they do actual roses or actual flowers, like you can tell that that's what the flower is. I kind of like, when I'm looking for a die or a stamp and die set, I like to look for a generic flower, and I'm kind of doing that in inverted commas, and that allows me to make it whatever color I want. I'm using my distress watercolor pencils here, and just to show you that you could use whatever medium you want. Okay, you could quite easily cut these out of a colored cardstock. You could use watercolor paints, you could use watercolor pencils, you could use inks, you could use distress inks are really good because they're translucent, so they give you that nice gradient look. You could use distress oxides. The difference with oxides though is they will build up your layers on top of each other. You could wet them and use them as a wet medium like I'm doing here with the watercolor pencils, and get a nice gradient going and get some different colors happening. The good thing about having these generic dyes in your collection, it allows you to have how can I word this? It allows you to practice your techniques, as in watercoloring, watercolor pencils, watercolor paints, watercolor inks, distress oxides, all of that. You can use the same technique. This is what I'm doing here is a wet on wet technique. Okay, so I've die cut the flowers. I'm wetting the flower itself with just clear water. Then I come in with the pigment, and what happens is the pigment then goes to where the most water is. It just flows, and it gives you a nice even, kind of like, when you look at a hibiscus flower or even like a carnation, where it's white in the base and then it comes up and it turns into the color. It gives you that sort of look. Now, what I decided to do was create my centerpieces. Now, this die is 2 flowers, the same shape, just one slightly smaller. Obviously, I'm going to layer these up. As you can see, I'm using seedless preserves. So on the larger ones, these are distress watercolor pencils, and I'm using on the top bigger flowers, I used, what colors did I use? Picked raspberry and kitsch flamingo. And then on the centerpieces, I thought I would use pink, but I actually really diluted the seedless preserves. So I used the same technique. It was wet on wet. So I completely wet the flower down. Then I add a little tiny bit of the lighter color, and then I go into the center with the seedless preserves where it's a lot more concentrated, and that just gives me that nice sort of stamen kind of look in the middle. Now, I am using 240 GSM cardstock, and it die cuts beautifully for me. It's the Poppy Crafts one that I get from Crafts Online. I used to always use American Crafts white textured cardstock. But when you're creating flowers like this, you don't want it to have that grid mark on it. So that's when I reach for that cardstock, and it's only like, it costs me like 20 cents a 12 by 12 sheet. So for me, I find this to be the most affordable way for me to do a lot of scrapbooking, especially if you hone in and if you really like a particular technique. Like, you might like creating florals and making them yourself. Buying ephemera is expensive. I'm not going to lie, okay? It is not a cheap exercise. Now, oh, sorry, I will explain here. I'm doing a dry technique in the center. So the flowers are dried, and they're probably still a little bit damp, but I'm just coming in with some Villainous Potion, and I'm just enhancing that kind of star look in the center, just to give it just a little bit more of a pop, more of a variegated look. I'm sort of drawing on a violet as a flower. That's kind of where I'm going in the center. Now, what I was saying, if you develop a technique, it does not have to cost you the earth. You can literally go to if you're an Aussie or a Kiwi, I'm sure you can do this overseas as well. I'm sure you guys have Dollar Tree, so I know you guys can do this. We don't have a Dollar Tree out here. You can just get a cheap water paint set. You could buy yourself, maybe splurge just a tiny touch and get an artist quality one, and maybe just from Montmartre, you could get it from there. I love the watercolor pencils because I love having most of my things in the same color range. That way I can layer up the Distress Oxide spray. I can put Distress watercolor pencils on top of that. I can use my Distress Oxides. I can use my inks. And I know if I pull picked raspberry from each of those pieces, from those different mediums, it's going to all look ever so slightly different, but it's the same color. And the reason it will look different is Distress Oxide spray, as soon as you add water to it, it oxidizes. So it's going to look slightly different to a watercolor pencil that, once I've sorry, I've got the two dogs in here with me. I've got Lexi and Gizmo in with me while I do my voiceover, because I'm doing a little bit earlier today because it's the Brisbane Echo show holiday today. So my husband's home, and he's trying to keep two dogs quiet out there. But I know when I do these voiceovers, if I don't bring Lexi and Gizmo into this room with me where they can't see out, they just bark and bark and bark and bark and bark. And it just takes me forever to do a simple voiceover. It's crazy. But I digress. So here I'm using a slightly different technique. I have put down Rustic Wilderness, peeled paint, and mowed lawn onto my sheet of, that's just a piece of copy paper laminated. That's what I'm using as a palette. I'm giving this a bit of a try to see if it's a bit more successful for me. For doing techniques like this, I've just put a bit of double-sided tape underneath it to hold it in place. Excuse me. And it is working an absolute treat. I'm loving it. And it didn't cost me the earth. So this way, by me dipping into it like this, it gives me a variegated look. Now, I left that bit in. Did you see all that black ink all over my hand? If you didn't, go back 2 seconds. I pulled out a Posca paint pen, and one of them had leaked, and I got it all over me, and it's still slightly on my skin, even though I have scrubbed the daylights out of it. I can't get it off. Anyway, so I pulled out these leaves. Now, I've had these cut for ages. This is a cut file by some assemblage required by MK GUNN. If you watch MK on YouTube, she's fantastic. She scrapbooks a little differently to me, but I love watching her stuff. And she's got a store, and you can buy some cut files from her. I bought these ages ago. I cut them, and I've never used them. So I pulled them out. because I thought, you know what, I'm going to use them on this layout. Why not? Let's chuck it in there and see what happens. I wanted to add a metallic element because sometimes when I'm creating a cluster, it needs a little bit of metallic something. So this is where my brain was going. Now I pulled out, everything's dried off, and this is where I decide that I'm going to start putting things together and auditioning things on my page. This background paper is from the HEIDIE SWAPP DREAMY collection, and I picked up 2 of these packs for $3 nearly 12 months ago, and I love the colours, and I have to say I'm actually hoarding them because I really, really like them. And I decided to pull one out today. Now, I'm scrapbooking just a simple photo of Taylor when she was younger. We went out and we were on a farm. We were having a picnic with motorbikes, all that sort of fun stuff. And with family. So I thought this would be a good simple photo, not to detract away from the clusters that I'm showing you. This is how I make them. So I've glued nothing together at this point. I am just poking bits and pieces in to see if this is what I like the look of. And I pulled out Love You from the Cocoa Vanilla Studio Midnight die cut titles. So that kept that nice and simple for me as well. And here's where I begin to just play. And this is the most important step when you are creating clusters. It's not to over process it, it's just to play. So I knew that I wanted my flowers connected together. So that just eliminated moving the whole thing all the time. So I glued my flowers together. Then, because I like a bit of texture on a page, I just bend my fingers, like I sort of push my fingernail without ripping it, but just to sort of bend my leaves up a little bit, my petals. So it kind of creates that look. Now, I moved all that out of the way because I knew that I needed a little bit of something more in the background. I didn't want stamping. I didn't want anything else. Just something super simple. Now, you'd be very surprised how a simple splatter like that was my Distress Oxide spray in peacock feathers on top of this Dreamy paper, which is gorgeous. Now, did you notice I just put my photo down slightly on an angle? That helps by... it sort of draws your eye not so much to a perfectly linear, what do you call it? You know, if everything's perfectly square, if something's slightly off, you notice it. So I wanted to put my photo down slightly off so that it's like that on purpose, if that makes sense. Now, I knew that I wanted to go ahead and create these 3 little flowers in a little bundle. How I had them earlier, having a bit of a toy. Do I want to go up the side or keep it down lower? Now, this is where I really like this, and I like where this is going. Stick around because this is not a very long video. Stick around to see how I finish these flowers off, because these are not finished by any stretch of the imagination. They are still a work in progress, and I absolutely love how this turns out is an understatement. So that top flower, because I wanted it to sort of come in a little bit, I just cut the petals and tucked it in under. Because I put foam behind my photo, I was able to tuck that flower in just a little bit more than the ones down the bottom. So that makes it look more like a tighter bunch cluster. And I think that totally works, right? Sorry, I needed a drink. Now, this is where I start playing with, I've tucked some leaves in. Notice where I've put the leaves, none of them are, you can't look at each cluster and go, oh yeah, she's just done it like that and plonked 3 down. That doesn't work. It is not pleasing to the eye. It is not, you're much better off making them all look ever so slightly different, because it gives it a more organic look. Now, this is where I realized why I hadn't used these leaves that I cut. I actually I've backed them with tracing paper, which is my tip. Instead of using vellum, it doesn't go all wrinkly on you, and it looks like vellum, and it's a quarter of the price. So I'm just backing these leaves, and what I'm doing is I'm fussy cutting them down. I'm trying to do it in the camera, but when you fussy cut, you sort of pull it towards yourself. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. Now, what I'm actually doing is I'm thinning out the gold part. What I noticed was it was too chunky for me. So do not fear adjusting any bit of ephemera to suit you. If you don't like the color of it, but you like the shape of it, paint it. If you like the color but not the shape, cut it. If you like the leaf shape but it's not working for you, cut it and see if it does something different. See how they look with the thinner. So you can see the two on there. You can see one's thicker and one's thinner. It just looks more elegant. And because I'm using florals, like pretty flowers, because I'm using that, I think it needed to go in a more of an elegant leaf formation. I do have other leaves that I could have used, but I wanted to use these up and I had them out, so that was fine. Now I pulled a doily out. This is me trying to work out how this Love You is going to go on here. The problem with the Love You, draw your attention to the fact that it's black. Well, it's not black, it's like a charcoal. It's charcoal, and there's no other charcoal anywhere on the layout. So it's standing out like, I can't say that on YouTube, but it's standing out like a sore thumb, right? Now, I have gone around my doily with these leaves. My doilies I buy from the $2 shop, and yes, they're the same ones that you would use for a party to dress a plate. That's what they are. I don't buy specific dyes for them or anything like that. I find that works. They're cheap, not a problem. Now, it doesn't bother me if they're acid and lignin free because my photo is up and it's not being touched by it, so it's fine. Now, I decided to pull out my gum Arabic. I call this my paint, my mica paint that I make, and it is 50. It's probably, all told, it's not quite 50-50 of gum Arabic and mica powder and water. So the gum Arabic, you don't need nearly as much as you think you do. And once you paint it down and it dries pretty quick, it doesn't move. It doesn't come off. The gum Arabic is the sticky agent that you need to keep your mica powders on your page. So I use it in a paint form, or I use it in a spray bottle form. When I use it in a spray bottle form, I use rubbing alcohol as my liquid instead of water. And I use either PVA glue or any sort of strong glue, and it works. It pulls it all together, and it's excellent stuff. If you want the recipes, they're over on my Facebook group and they're pinned at the top of the page. Now I'm going through and I've put a halfback pearl in the center of all these florals, and I'm going around with liquid pearls in white opal, and I'm just using my pokey tool, if that's what you call it, and I'm just dragging the white opal liquid pearls out into a little bit of a line, just to give you some metallic shimmer in the center of the flowers, and I think that looks amazing. Then I just come in with some more liquid pearls and dot them all in and around the leaves, and I'm using different colored greens just to sort of bulk it up and add extra interest to it without adding more leaves to it. Now this is just a super simple way of doing this, and then I do come in with some glossy accents, and I'm not squeezing the bottle, I am just letting it naturally come out of the bottle, and I'm just very gently touching the edge of the leaves. And I go over some of the green leaves as well. It gives you shine, shimmer, and it just lifts it. So that is what I do on this layout, and I do run around very quickly with my gold pen and create a border around the edge, just a metallic border to replicate that gold one more time. And I absolutely love how this layout turned out. These are super simple clusters. I will be doing another video on tips and techniques to show you how to create clusters that maybe have tickets in them or something like that, if that's what you're after. And notice by having the leaves backed with the vellum, it gives them a bit more body. And there you go, you can see the center of the flowers now, and you can see what they look like with the little bit of white glossy accents, and it just gives it a really cool look. If you got value from this video, I would love you to give me a thumbs up or a comment, or share my page with your friends. Let them know that this is what I do over here. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly. If things don't work, you see it too. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll chat to you soon. Bye for now.